I want to bring in Symone Sanders Townsend, former chief spokesperson for Vice President Harris, co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend. Also with me, Elise Jordan, former aide to the President George W. Bush White House and State Department, also an MSNBC political analyst. I don't know, Symone, is mind your own damn business the new bumper sticker message that we're going to see on the Harris website? What do you make of this Tim Walz, including, by the way, clapping for himself? He gets so into the crowd, he claps for himself.
Governor Walz is actually originally from Nebraska, and as a native Nebraskan myself, a North Omahaan, that is very Nebraska nice of him. The clapping for oneself, it's endearing, I believe. Look, when it comes to, it's interesting, the bumper sticker, right? It made me think of Governor Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, and when she ran her first race for Michigan, her gubernatorial race, her tagline was "Fix the damn roads," and it seemed quite simple, and it spoke to something everyone in Michigan could identify with, the roads, whether you're talking about in your city roads or you're driving on the highway. She wants to fix the damn roads. And it was endearing. It was straightforward. I think mind your own dang on business is right along that line. And it doesn't just speak to what is happening in the reproductive front, not just in some of the battleground states, but truly across the country. It speaks to folks and their children, right? It talks about its health care. It is education. The mind your own business can go to so many different things. It is right in line with the freedom messaging that the vice president has been championing, frankly, since Dobbs was overturned. And I do think that is something that is going to speak across demographics and to voters who don't like what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are selling.
Elise, Walz has, I think, a particular skill set, which seems to be delivering a kind of a devastating line with humor. Take a listen to this.
He froze in the face of the COVID crisis. He drove our economy into the ground. And make no mistake, violent crime was up under Donald Trump. That's not even counting the crimes he committed.
Do you think, Elise, that pointed, clever, can compete with the grievance politics of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance?
Yes, Chris, I do, because it's good television. It's entertaining. And that, at the end of the day, is what drew so many voters back in 2016 to Donald Trump when he was the political new thing. And now he's not anymore. It's Kamala Harris and Tim Walz who are driving the conversation, who are front and center in media coverage. And they look like they're having a lot of fun doing it, too. And I think that's key. There's a sense of joy, a playfulness. It's not, doom and gloom. And the democracy message of if they don't win, democracy is going to die. It's just these people, get them out of your lives, get government out of your life. And like Symone was saying, that has the ability to, to reverberate between different sectors of the electorate who don't want the government in their lives. And it's kind of hilarious that they've managed to turn that message against Republicans who previously were not for government intervention in the minute facets of your life.
Symone, there are the words you say on the trail, and then there's also, right, the way you say them, your persona. And, Elise called it, he seemed to be having a lot of fun, joy. I thought as I was watching last night, he seemed delighted to be on that stage. It's not a word you hear a lot anymore. And some folks are calling what he has big dad energy. Does that somehow make his attack lines even more potent?
I think so. Look, I think it is. It's the fact that it is matter of fact, if you will. Voters across the board, look, winning campaigns are campaigns that are about the future, are campaigns that are about hope, are campaigns that give people something to vote for, not just someone, but a vision, something people can see and can get behind. And the thing about Governor Walz is that he does seem very endearing. If you've ever, and you know, I've had the opportunity to, you know, chat with and speak to the governor a number of times. And the last time I saw him, you know, it's just like, you forget that this man is the governor of Minnesota. He's like, oh, I love, he watches the network. He loves the show. I tried to live book him actually in that last interaction. And he seems like such a, maybe a regular person is the line to use. And I think that's part of the reason he and the vice president connected. You know, obviously Governor Walz is currently the chair of the Democratic Governors Association, to be determined if he is going to step down from that role over the next 90 days and continue while he campaigns for the vice presidency, if you will, with Vice President Harris. But as the chair of the Democratic Governors Association, he had interactions, obviously, with other governors across the country, with the president and vice president regularly. And Governor Walz and the vice president, they knew one another. But it's my understanding when she sat down to have her one-on-one interview with him, it was the chemistry, the endearing nature, the way that he talked about the role of a vice president. And it felt like to the vice president that they were on the same page, and he was someone that she could work with for the next 4, maybe even 8 years. And I think that's what it came down to for the vice president. And one may think that might be what it comes down to for the voters.
And you know, Elise, at one point last night, Tim Walz shared the story of how his children were conceived through IVF, kind of his real life experience, adding to Harris's high-profile defense of reproductive rights. We know that she has been the spokesperson for this administration. And I'm wondering how you see that playing out on the campaign trail and maybe, if it actually happens, on the debate stage.
This is a terrible issue for Donald Trump. He is the president who is known as taking away women's reproductive freedom, and that he is part of an effort. He has a vice president who's even more draconian than he is, and they want to do even more to restrict your reproductive freedom. And so voters know that Kamala Harris has been out there on this issue. When I was in Wisconsin and talking to Democrats, they were excited that she would be elevated to this role because it also meant that she could draw more attention to women's health and access to health care in the country. So anything they do to draw that contrast to keeping the government out of your doctor's office versus sending doctors to prison for performing healthcare procedures is good. That's a great contrast for the independent swing voters that Kamala Harris needs to win.
Elise Jordan, Symone Sanders Townsend, love having both of you on the program.